Stick around to the end of the podcast and you'll hear a contribution from Andrew Cartmel, the script editor of The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, who gave his time for free to offer enlightenment and insight. So it behoves me to point out that at the time of recording, the 7th of Andrew's Vinyl Detectove novels was about to be released by Titan. If you're in the UK, well, it'll be out by the time that you hear this, published on the 19th of March. In the US, April the 9th. There are 7 of these Vinyl Detectove novels, and Andrew is rightly proud of them, so if you enjoy his contribution, perhaps head to your local stockist and avail yourselves of his work. Well, welcome, folks. I'm sure you'd like to know you're at the start of a brand new podcast show. It's Happy Times and Places with me, Toby Hadoke, seeing if I can guess my special guests' favourite things about their chosen Doctor Who story as I watch the episodes and commentate along.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to you, Toby. I'm Connor Adkins, and I'm typically a Doctor Who artist who happens to draw an awful lot of Doctor Who in realistic format. But today, I'm here to challenge you to see if you can guess my favourite parts from the Doctor Who story, The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. Let's see what you got.
Well, hello, my darlings. It's Toby Hadoke here. And I don't know why I darlinged you. Am I feeling unnecessarily theatrical? I never think there's ever such a thing as unnecessary theatricality. I quite like it. But I suspect maybe I'm attempting to put on the motley with extra elan because I have to entertain you or die. It's Happy Times and Places. I'm hoping wherever you are is in both a place and time of happiness, or if not, if this provides the requisite amount in order to transform the one you're in into the environment you require it to be. I'm grateful to you for listening. Yes, I suppose am I suddenly conscious of the fact that this is designed to be a form of entertainment, because this is a story about entertaining people. I don't know, but I certainly know this is a story that I very much enjoyed upon broadcast, having dreaded it. I remember in the build-up, this seemed to be the one casting Adrian Mole. I don't think Danny Peacock was announced in all of the casting announcements. I think maybe DWB had announced him and DWM hadn't. I can't remember, but I remember him not being a surprise, but him not being one of the main. And I thought, well, no, he's because he was, as I said last week, he was big in our house. But it was Jessica Martin, of course, who is hugely talented, but, I knew as an impressionist. So, yeah, it was Light Ent. It was set in a circus. Oh! And, of course, then on it comes, and it's a thing of beauty that does have a high comedic quotient, but is made and shot like, not like a horror movie, but certainly like something that has the intent and the desire to be disturbing. And it is quite like a lot of the, in inverted commas, oddball stories of the McCoy era. A bit like some of the Robert Holmes stuff, the characters are sort of written in types or archetypes, but archetypes can be real. And again, I have no problem with the sort of performance, the sort of character that can only exist in the Doctor Who universe, so long as there is, a truth, truth at its heart. Anything big can still be truthful. It takes a certain kind of actor to do it, and I think the certain kinds of actor that can do that are the actors I like seeing in Doctor Who. I recorded this on a BASF videotape. They came in silver boxes, and I was very pleased because mine matched. I got one for each E180s for this season, and I bought Letraset in order to make my spines gorgeous, and I spent a lot of time on a cold rug floor, scratching to lay the letraset. So it said, it was remember, and I was very pleased because it went 4-parter, 3-parter, 3-parter, 4-parter. So I had Remembrance, Happiness Patrol, Remembrance 1 to 4, Happiness Patrol 1 to 3, Silver Nemesis 1 to 3, Greatest Show 1 to 4. I wonder if I still have those tapes in the loft. I got rid of a lot of my tapes, but because this was off air, I think I had a feeling that this was as good as it got. And BASF, I felt, recorded the colours rather beautifully. They were sort of superseded by Scotch tapes because they were supposed to be the very best. But they were much more expensive. And I secretly I felt more of a kinship with the BASF. I think maybe because they'd been one of the first ones that I bought and I'd liked them. This, to anybody young, I may as well be going... But this was when you recorded Doctor Who onto a big square box with tape in it, a cassette, and watched over and over again and hoped that it didn't get chewed up, and had to line things up and press. But I had a system on the video machine where I would press pause or play and record and pause, which was better than pressing play and record to start recording, because the pause gave it a cleaner start, so that my episodes were very beautifully added together, and they'd go forward 2 and then back 1, so you had to line up the counter right so that you didn't chop off part of the end of what you'd had before, but you also didn't want loads of unnecessary gunk in between. Although, now I sort of think, well, 5 seconds of gunk might have been, a lovely window into what was surrounding that world. And in fact, I think I may have mentioned this last week, when I was recording the trailers, I'd got into the habit of recording the coming soon tonight, or Monday night, whatever night of the week it was, on BBC One. I knew I'd got to the point where I knew when those were going to be on, and so I would record those bits to get the trailer for Doctor Who, which was usually just, and Doctor Who's sticky situation with the Candyman continues at at 7:35, and then a clip. So, it wasn't anything too fancy, but I still, I was trying to... as part of me entertained the idea that, if the world ended, I might be the only person with, who'd recorded this stuff. Because, I was used to missing episodes. So, you go, well, I better record it just in case some sort of cataclysm happens and my tapes are the only ones left, and at least I will have preserved Doctor Who and any sort of extracurricular bits of Doctor Who. But I buggered up the trailers for Greatest Show because I got so keen on making sure that I was chopping off any unnecessary extra material from those trailers that I actually cut off the end of the Doctor Who clip. So certainly the bit where Captain Cook, I think for episode 4, goes, you're the next one due on in the ring, I think, was the bit of the trailer. He sort of went to open his mouth and then it cut off. I'd overcompensated and end up chopping bits off, which seems to, negate all the effort of putting that together in the first place. So not terribly happy with the Greatest Show ones that I recorded, because I'd got too keen on making it so slick that there was not too much mess. In fact, in cleaning up the mess, I spilt dinner, or erased dinner. Anyway, those are the things that one got up to as a Doctor Who fan back in the day, and now it's all available here. But the trailers aren't. But even if they, I don't even know if I've got them upstairs. But even if I had, I wouldn't be going to get them. And I sort of go, I'm sure somebody else has recorded. Now I'm the complete opposite. The idea that I might have anything unique, it's like, nah, I'm sure I didn't. Although I did with something I gave back to the radio archive, which I've talked about elsewhere. So anyway, I hope those trailers for the individual episodes of season 25 exist in somebody else's collection, because if not, I destroyed the only potential copies. I'm sure I didn't. But my whole week sort of revolved around getting ready to record, and I had to really concentrate and make it perfect, because I wanted my record, because these were going to be what I was going to watch forever and ever and ever. And of course now I just have to go to the Whoniverse on iPlayer and press a button, and here it is. But anyway, that's a window into the life of a Doctor Who fan in 1988. There we go. So let's crack on with the colourful, not because it's been recorded on a BASF tape, but because that's what resides in the BBC archive. Episode 2 of The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. And, of course, the title refers to the venue of the episode and, of course, the mothership, the programme that houses this particular story. That is Doctor Who. That is what I'm about to watch. And I'm going to press play in 3, 2, 1. So here we go, and what a long title sequence it is. So yes, a curious cliffhanger that I find I kind of like because it's unusual, but I remember I think making myself like it more than perhaps I actually liked it. Does that make sense? I liked the idea of liking it more than I in my heart of hearts, I'd much prefer a cliffhanger where there's something really exciting happening or some deadly some deadly situation. But there's part of me that goes, yeah, but I do kind of like the fact that it's a bit weird and a bit different. And I do like Stephen Wyatt's writing. I do think it's a breath of fresh air in the way that Doctor Who is done. I like Doctor Who, even though I'm not drawn to psychedelia or surrealism particularly. I always feel a bit thick when it comes to surrealism. I find this sort of abstract, slightly comic strippy, and I've never read really graphic novels. I'm not well versed in all of that stuff. I find this a welcome direction for Doctor Who to take, and now in retrospect, yeah, I do enjoy this era that is bold, and yeah, I love that image and that idea. And a circus setting for Doctor Who is a fantastic idea. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just the colours of this story. Screw the BASF tape. It does have a nice visual palette to it. Look, you can see the chief clown coming behind him, which you notice if you watched it like I did, 100 times in the week between. Go, oh, somebody's coming in behind him. Because I've got a feeling this wasn't the original cliffhanger, was it? I think that's the case. I'm pretty sure that it's a slightly contrived cliffhanger. I love Ian Reddington. He will be, look at the way he did that thumb thing, he sort of pointed and then very, very clinically sort of closes his fist. It's a brilliant piece of casting. He is a terrific actor, Reddington, who, he's done it regular in EastEnders and in Coronation Street. And I remember him popping up in the bill as sort of quite a nerky character. He's an actor that, I think had obviously come to the attention of casting directors and directors at this time, and was being given good slices of things. I haven't seen him on telly recently. I know he's been working in theatre. He was touring in Oh What a Lovely War, but I think he's a really able actor, and I think every second of everything he does in this, that bit where he just goes through the curtain, we've got the smile, and then the smile fades, and he receives every second of everything that he does, he's put some thought into. And makes him interesting to watch. And again, I've said it before, that in this sort of television where you can't cut, you're not cutting as fast as we're cutting now. Although the camera angles and the cuts and the pacing of this is, I think, particularly good. But nonetheless, you still need your actors to occasionally keep acting, if you like, whilst the camera's going from one place to the other, or whilst you can't get an edit that wouldn't otherwise be too choppy and awkward. You need the actors to help you, and I think Reddington, I think all the actors in this do a great job. But and she deliberately, she drops the accent there, which I like, because I think she's great as well. Again, Alan Waring's very good at sort of having a character give a look, one character to another, to sort of underline that there's a sense of menace or that there's something unexpected. And I love the way he sort of uses his actor's face, and I think there's something beautifully furtive about her interaction there, where, you know, she's not able to do that much, but there's a lot of subtext in that performance. It's really nicely done. All of this interaction stuff is really nice. And he gives her a look here, doesn't he? Yeah, he sees that. Touch. Oh, look at that. That is beautiful. The way that he goes out of focus, and then we favour her. The camera work that Alan Waring gets out of his BBC crew, especially considering we know that they were having to erect a tent and do all of this stuff, you know, on the fly, I think is phenomenally good. I understand people who are nervous about this story because they're used to Doctor Who, you know, being with soldiers fighting monsters in quarries, and it being a much more sort of straightforward, believable sort of science fiction, but plausibly 20th century feel, or at least 20th century logic and world building. So even things like Frontier in Space, where it's still within a sort of realistic, plausible kind of tone and universe that we can understand. I can understand people who might shrink from this and go, this is slightly too abstract, this is slightly too strange. We've got this, you know, this family who are recognizable to us visually, but don't, you know, but the context of them is strange and off-putting. And of course, that's the whole point. It's meant to be go, why have we got this weird suburban family who are clearly not a weird suburban family, but this strange abstraction of one? Now, that's the appeal of this to me, is I like Doctor Who, and, you know, more straightforward Doctor Who does this, and I've talked about this before, and it's obviously not unique to me either. We all talk about this, about how, you know, the Yeti on the loo in Tooting Bec, Doctor Who taking the familiar and perverting it, and that is part of what makes it unsettling to kids, that you have statues that are bad, that you have cracks in the wall that are bad, that you have troll dolls and daffodils that are bad. But they're bad, but still within a recognizable context. Whereas here we have this odd 1950s family who are a bit creepy and strange, so that we know that they're not really a 50s family. We don't really know what they are, and so it's a different way of messing with our heads and messing with the recognizable. And I can understand why some people shrink from that, because it's doing a slightly different job. It's unsettling in a different way. It's not taking the everyday and making it lethal. It's taking the everyday and sort of turning it on its head and making it a bit strange and weird. But then I like this, that you've got the fact that it's the electronics, and I love even, you know, he just presses some wires there, but it's got a couple of Dick Millsy little button poinky noises, and it feels hefty, it feels electronic. It makes me feel like I am watching a sort of robot-y type of thing. And one that is solid and operational, and it's amazing what those little augmentations to a button pressing can do from the sound effects geezers and geezesses. Let's not forget Elizabeth Parker. I mean, it works for Sylvester McCoy's Doctor, because he is, you know, he is this a bit like the actor who plays him, and the best star actors bring bits of themselves. I love this with the juggling ball, you know, clubs flying past him. But it is a bit odd that the Doctor's so sort of childishly just wants to do a turn. It's not quite the sort of mysterious traveller, although he does bring that to it too. But I love this. I love this scene though, because he's so good, and the way that he flits between the clown voice and so tell me where you found it, and what he does with his mouth there, and the fact that he sort of keeps that facade and he still moves like a clown. His body language is excellent. It's a brilliant synthesis of vocal performance and physical performance, and is a tour de force. I mean, I think he did win a poll, I think, in DWB, or he came very high as being in best villains ever. And I remember it being sort of written about at the time, going, that's obviously just because he's fresh in the memory and he's not going to stand the test of time. And I think that was probably a fair comment, but I do actually think he is. It's a shame the story isn't celebrated more, because I think he is one of the great Doctor Who villains, the Chief Clown, and he's not even the sort of main villain, because you've got Captain Cook, although he's a bad ally, I suppose, as opposed to no, he's pretty awful, Captain Cook. But the chief clown is magnificent, and I think is one of the most original and best wrought bad guys that the show's ever had. Actually, I think he's really that good, and I love this musical riff from Mark that is strange, but it has pace and it has tempo, but it's also sort of evocative of the sounds that we've got coming from the circus as well. But and I like the way that Jessica Martin is in this scene where she's in the cell looking sort of forlorn and guilty, and she's very good at showing that she's kind of under his thrall and is reluctantly sort of silenced by him. And it's a shame what happens to Nord. This is his last episode. I feel we had the best of him in part 1, and I do love those 2 scenes of being horrible to your ears and do you want me to do something unpleasant to your face. And it's a kind of ignominy that, the character is kind of done here now. But I'm very glad Danny Peacock ends up in Doctor Who. But as he's sort of making his way out, Chris Jury comes in, who was very well known at the time for being in Lovejoy, which I didn't watch at the time. I then subsequently did catch up with and very much enjoyed, because I think he carried on being in Lovejoy after this, and they did repeats. But Chris became a well-known, a busy TV director, well-known in the sense that if you read the end of the credits, EastEnders a lot and things like that. But Chris's name was all over the place. But I've had the pleasure of meeting Chris, who's a very committed lefty. He's I think his chosen charity when I interviewed him was the Morning Star. So he's a man of conviction. My conviction doesn't stray that far to the left, I have to say, but I'm always interested in talking to people who are, firmly entrenched in their political views, and he's certainly got very interesting views on television and how it works and what's happening to it, and his view from the inside is an informed one, and Deadbeat is a very interesting character, and he goes through this transformation. But yeah, he starts off being a bit of a deadbeat, a bit strange. And T.P. McKenna's very good here, where he sort of maintains his calm under strangulation, which is quite a nice sort of gag. And again, beautiful sort of hand gestures and stuff. It's great makeup too on Ian Reddington, but it's I quite enjoy the transparency with which Captain Cook. He's such an arrogant buffoon that he's not afraid of giving away his tricks or showing his calculating, selfish and unpleasant side, because he's so confident in himself, and the juxtaposition between that and him drinking his tea, and that's a nice bit of business where the doctor's going, I'll practice my juggling, and he goes, well, you get killed, and I drop the juggling. So that means that the scene ends on a note, on a little bit of business, on the actor helping the director to keep driving the story forward. There's really so much attention to detail in the way that this is put together. It's a lot of care has gone into it, which again, considering the constraints the production was under, I think is a triumph. I really do think. Again, I understand if this is not to your taste, but I think none of the bits that you might dislike aren't due to incompetence or a lack of vision or a compromised staging or an inability to balance tone. The tone is absolutely correct for what they wanted, which is a good balance between the bizarre, the funny, the otherworldly, but the scary, and and you know, they do a good job in with limited resources of this, suggesting, you know, the reality behind this weird place, which is this strange psychic circus. But you know, there is clearly a relationship between the ringmaster and Morgana and the clown, and a bit of a history as well. And you know, it's in quite broad strokes, but we don't need to know exactly how the circus worked and all of that sort of thing. We just need to sort of know why the characters are where they're at, and why different ones have, you know, different strengths of loyalties, which enables Morgana to show us the sort of the conscience and a sort of fracture in the, you know, in the pretense, which helps with the Doctor. She's doing comedy acting here, though, which she's decided to do because WizKid has entered the room, and again, that's a reasonable choice. And there's a lovely sort of vulnerability there to Christopher Guard, who I've noticed has released an autobiography, which is available, I think, certainly on Amazon, but it's published by a publisher. It's not a self-published thing. So if you're listening to this and it's put you in the mood to find out more, I don't know if he mentions Greatest Show. I haven't ordered it myself, but I will, because he's had a fascinating career, Chris Guard, and he was, you know, he's the brother of Dominic Guard, who's in Terminus. His father, Philip Guard, the actor whose voice is sampled on I Am the Walrus from a radio production of King Lear, has just died, aged about 96, I think. Philip Guard also exists in that early footage, that test of Robin Hood that Patrick Troughton is in. It's on one of the physical media releases, isn't it? That we've got a short section of Robin Hood. I think it's on the Power of the Daleks, a very early piece of tele-recording where they were sort of testing the equipment that has a bit of Robin Hood, and Philip Guard is one of the people in the scene with Patrick Troughton. So Dominic's had a really interesting, and Pippa Guard is a relation as well, who's is an actress. And he did Treasure Island with Brian Blessed. So Chris did A Woman of Substance with Jenny Seagrove, and Dominic's in that as well. And he was a regular in Casualty for a bit. So he's been all over. Chris Gardner was definitely a name when this was broadcast. I mean, it's cast to the hilt. Now this kind of works as a gag, doesn't it? I think the weightlifting is very unconvincing because it's not a very convincing prop. But, you know, this is where it begs your indulgence a little bit, because it goes, you know, okay, you've got the hard man who's good at weightlifting, but he's not going to be able to tell a joke. And so, of course, he goes from scoring high score to scoring nothing and get zapped. I'm not sure the execution of that quite works, because I mean, the Doctor's smiling seconds later, but also, you know, it's a vague thunderclap, and you know, there's the little bit of dust and the scrap of clothing left. It is slightly comic strip, but within the context of the story that it's in, it sort of gets away with that. But I think it's one of the bits where I think, because I like this story, I'm okay with it. I don't think it's the best part of the story. But if you were minded to not be invested in this tale because its various constituent parts aren't to your taste, you could watch the death of Nord and go, well, that's too comical, that's too silly. I don't believe in it, because it's a sort of sanitized, even slightly comedy death. It's a very theatrical way that Mags sort of walks towards the door, the cage with the Doctor to start the argument. It's like, right, we're on, and I think that again fits within the context of it. But it's a very 80s Doctor Who moment. I think it's the Doctor Who of Bonnie Langford and of that kind of slightly stagey sort of blocking and performance style, which again I'm absolutely fine with, particularly in stories like this. And again, I think Jessica Martin is just that piece of body language that she does that I think is quite sort of stagey. But it as I say, it works, and I think her performance is terrific. She's got real fire. She is vulnerable. She's funky. She's join the club. I think Jessica Martin's great. And look, there is a real sort of vulnerability and a tension there. She's great, Jessica Martin. And I worried about her being in it because I didn't watch the Bobby Davro thing, but that's all I knew her from. She's a Bobby Davro impressionist lady. She's really talented. She's great. And of course, she comes back to Doctor Who as the voice of the Queen in Voyage of the Damned. I'm just trying to think. There's a lot of this cast of Facebook friends. This might be the cast that I have the most Facebook friends in, because I'm Facebook friends with Sophie, I'm Facebook friends with Chris, I'm Facebook friends with Christopher Gard, I'm Facebook friends with Jessica Martin. Goodness me. And I'm Facebook friends with Mark Ayres. And I've met Rico Ross. I did get an email from Ian Reddington. He wanted to do Who's Round, but I was unfortunately, the day that he was available, I was doing warm-up for University Challenge, and that was my, at the time, I thought that was my pension. It was certainly one of my best paid gigs, but I don't do it anymore. They don't have a warm-up man anymore. I was the last warm-up man for University Challenge. And I held on as long as I could as the budget got cut around me. But eventually the money people, the mother, the father and the child sitting in the gods there looked down at the warm-up man and held up naught. I love what they've done with her. It is quite 80s. It is quite an 80s look, but it's a sort of timeless 80s look in a way. I think it kind of, because it works within the whole look of the story. I think they're trying to hint here that Mags might be a werewolf because she's not wild about. I mean, this had leaked. We knew this before the story went out, that Mags was a werewolf. I think that had been part of the, if not the publicity, it had certainly been leaked. I love the lighting in this room. I think it's beautiful, and I think this is really spooky. And I remember a girl at school who I didn't know particularly well, but we were doing a thing saying she loved the clowns and she found this Doctor Who really scary. And it really felt to me like, people in the were sort of loving this story. But there's a brilliant moment now, isn't there? Does she come into the foreground now? And without the camera drawing our attention to it, that robot's arm moves and there's a little musical cue. Is that kind? It's when it's out of focus. I love that, and the piece of music that is absolutely fantastic. That is the stuff of scares, because what part of your brain is telling you when it goes out of focus at the back is we're not interested in this anymore. Favour Ace, because that's who we're worried about. That and then the very clever director has gone, but I'm misdirecting you with that because now the background is going to move. So I've drawn you away from the background, so it's acting like a little subliminal message, like a little subliminal thing. And it's an absolutely terrific moment. Well done again, Alan Waring. Now this is very painful because you can tell that that's on pause. There's something about videotape that has been paused, which is slightly blocky, which doesn't have. You could tell it's paused. You can tell it's paused, and they do it a few times in 80s things. Remember they started doing it with the opening titles of Bergerac, and it's vile because it thinks it's being all modern because you can pause without getting sort of tracking lines and things like that. But you can tell when something's been paused. An 80s paused videotape looks naff. But they have to do it occasionally with Doctor Who with special effects, I assume, to add the sort of paint box, bottom to that and the illustration, which is fine, and it's an absolutely reasonable thing to have done. It's just that a bit like when one can pick up when a piece of sound has been dubbed in post, which I can, and I'm sure most people watching can, because I think we all speak television, don't we? I think we can also spot when it is a piece of videotape that has been paused in order to steady the picture in order to add some post production. And I used to, when I was watching these as a kid and rewatching them, I would now be reading the credits out loud, but I would make my own credits order because David Tilley has just passed away. I've just found out that David Tilley has passed away. He worked as early as Planet of Giants, and he was a child actor. And he was so helpful. He worked on Evil, he worked on Robots of Death, but he worked as recently as as great a show, and he was such a nice man. Just found out that David has passed away, sadly. R.I.P. David. But yeah, I used to read the credits, and I used to change the order, and I would have had Nord up way higher on the credits because I'm very fond of Danny Peacock. So we're not going to do that. So well done, iPlayer, there, playing the whole of the closing credits. So, what is my favourite bit of episode 2? Well, I mean, I'm tempted to say that the lighting in that caravan, that moment where the robot clown, the half robot, the stripped back, it's got its clown-like carapace wrenched from it, and it's the the exoskeleton within. Can you have an exoskeleton within, or because exo means outside? But you know what I mean. The skeletal androidy bits, housed by the clownish edifice. And that helps with the storytelling. That's a good insight into what those clowns really are, which is why they move sort of extra clown-like, and why they can be a little bit sort of run past or outwitted or whatever, because they are, slightly slow-witted robots, which sort of works with the fact that they have to sort of occasionally run quite slowly down those corridors. I think they've rationalised all of that and made sense of it very well. But it's a great visual, but it's the beauty of what Alan Waring has done, bringing it into the blur, having it then move. So, something is happening behind our ace who's in the foreground. All those beautiful foreground shots and out of focus at the back. Again, that bit I drew attention to before with the chief clown where he goes out of focus and we favour Morgana. Oh, yes! Oh, there's Morgana in this, and then Morgaine in the next broadcast story. Isn't that interesting? 2 characters with almost the same name, one story after the other, albeit separated by a season break. Anyway, I'm here for those sorts of fascinating insights. Go on, that's got to give me more than 3 noughts from the Suburban Family, which is now what I'm picturing every single one of you as. I do like the colour palette. I do like the look of the whole thing, which again, even the sort of whiteness of the rocks at the very beginning that are behind the Doctor and Ace as they're contemplating going in. There's just something about the way it's either. They weren't grading in those days, were they? But there does seem to be an awareness of what the colour looks like, or it just looks less shoddy, or it's just properly framed, or the bit more attention to detail, or they just got lucky. I don't know, but the visuals and the colour. I always think of the colour, which is just seems to me, slightly more than the colour you'd have in a naturalistic piece, and yet it absolutely perfectly suits it. It's not garish, it's not pantomimic, it's not naff in the way that Gallifrey is a bit naff when it's got purple and silver cushions. Anyone that is has slightly OTT, has where you can sort of see the joys. The Ringmaster's costume is a bit low rent and gaudy, but it kind of works. Whereas actually, I think the clowns and everything, I think they look magnificent. The chief clown in particular, I think, yeah, I know. I think it's, and again, Captain Cook, they're wearing sort of comic book versions of what those characters were wearing. They're all clean, and they're not nobody's got stubble or stains except for Deadbeat, but he's supposed to be he is sort of costumed to be scruffy because his character is knackered and broken and all of that. It's not sort of like real dirt and real sweat, and I say he hasn't got sort of stubble, has he? Or maybe he has got a little, but it's not gritty, it's not grimy, it's not Aliens, is it? There's not sweat and oil and all of that. It's much more garish than that, and yet it works. Which it's going to have to bring. I cannot, and I think because in that scene, I think is where he really establishes himself as a great villain. That bit where, and the camera's slightly handheld, isn't it? Where they sort of do that perverse sort of dance with Ace in order to ensnare her, and he does that where did you find that earring? In the sort of falsetto clown speak, and then when she, stands up to him a little bit, he gets all he scratches away at the vocal veneer and reveals the rasp beneath. I think because he is one of the outstanding things of this story, and I think, as I say, one of the outstanding villains in all of Doctor Who, I have to, because he's definitely going to be chosen. Choose Ian Reddington as the chief clown in a cast where everyone, I think, does a decent, good job, and everyone has interesting stuff to do. I think he goes above and beyond the call of duty, and I think he makes something rather special. And I know it's been said as well that actually on paper, there's the chief clown is not. I'm sure Alan Waring said, it was a difficult part to cast because actually on paper it wasn't as well drawn as you would think from the final rendition of him, because the actor brings so much to it and did so much with it. So for me, the best thing, well, no, because Alan Waring's so good as well, and the script, it's got a lot going for it. But no, nonetheless, I do think he is in a story that I really like. Sometimes I might say, well, he's the best thing in it, because, and what I mean is, it's the only good thing in it. There's lots of good things about Greatest Show in the Galaxy, but one of the very best is Ian Reddington. And as I say, no, I think he's probably, for me, my favourite thing about the story, full stop. So I have to choose him because I think he will get chosen sooner rather than later. So what is my guest, Connor, going to choose for his favourite thing for episode 2 of Greatest Show in the Galaxy? What you got?
So, Toby, you've just come to the end of episode 2, and my favourite thing about episode 2 is the character of the Chief Clown.
Yes!
Now, in this episode, I'm pretty certain that if you were to look up in the dictionary the definition of coulrophobia, i.e. the fear of clowns, I'm pretty certain that there's a picture of Ian Reddington's Chief Clown right next to it, because he is just dripping with malice behind him. He comes off as so all smiles and friendly, like he wants to invite you in, but when you see him further on into the episode, it gets so dark and so serious so quickly, and he just drips scariness. And the one scene where he confronts Ace about Flower Child, where he goes to so sinister so quickly, it's just very, very chilling from the get-go.
Yes! Well, I'm so glad I chose it, because I would have been bereft had I held out for the Chief Clown and then not been able to choose it, because obviously if I hadn't chosen it this episode, Connor did choose it, I wouldn't then be allowed to choose it, because I would already have taken it. But as it is, I get the point, because I guessed the same thing as Connor, so we're 1-1. And as we reach the halfway point of the Greatest Show in the Galaxy, because we both chose the greatest thing about the Greatest Show in the Galaxy, which is Ian Reddington's utterly magnificent turn as the Chief Clown. Now, I've lined up an interview with Andrew Cartmel about this story, but I cannot speak to him until I've recorded all of the commentaries, because then I need to go to him armed with the knowledge of what I chose and what Connor chose. And I think it will be a fun thing to see if Andrew chooses more of my things or Connor's things, or 5 things completely separately. But I don't know. I cannot envisage that right now, because it's going to be done well after the event. But that's the only way I can sort of make it work better for you as the listener. Because if I go to Andrew without knowing what we've chosen, then I'm interviewing him blind, as it were. So I need to go into him forewarned, which means that I'm now throwing forward to something that doesn't exist yet, because it hasn't happened. So I'm being slightly vague. But nonetheless, with Connor and I in accord, let us go forward in time to a moment that doesn't exist yet, which is when I have a conversation with Andrew Cartmel to see what he likes about episode 2 of The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. So, handing over to you, Toby, from the future. Let us move forward to episode 2. And both Connor and I chose the same thing, but let's see what your choice is for episode 2.
Well, this is a bit weird, but normally the bane of Doctor Who stories are corridor scenes, right? Running around corridors, and also the corridors generally don't look too good. But in this, what I'm going to call the corridor scenes were magnificent, because if you remember, the corridors consisted of billowing cloth. They're running through these fabric corridors, which are, between the tents. And I just loved those. This is to take a deep dive for a moment, but back in the days of the Avengers, there was a guy called Robert Fust, and he eventually ended up directing some Avengers and directing other stuff, including Dr. Phibes and the final program. So there's a whole rabbit hole we could go down. But he started out as a designer, and the tent setting of Greatest Show, not tense, but not in the sense of stress, but tense in the sense of the structures, fabric structures, were visually this astonishing kind of asset to us, because they looked great on camera. And there are these sequences where they're running down corridors, and there's particularly a sequence where they're going trans-dimensional, and there's this kind of rainbow color shift. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And the tent settings reminded me very much of the sort of design that Robert Fust would have done, and I thought it worked incredibly well. It's something that was cheap, but it was visually bulletproof in the way that your usual overlit cardboard, alien planet corridor could look really bad. These looked great. So the corridor sequences are what I'm going to nominate, which is very strange.
That's a lovely choice, and there's quite a few of them, because they sort of link the action. And you've got Mark Ayres' very rattly score that keeps the pace up with the moving around. And I have to say, and it's sometimes, and you've cited it in some of your books as often the bane of Doctor Who's life can be the lighting. The lighting on Greatest Show is fantastic.
It was Henry, wasn't it? I've forgotten his surname.
It's Henry Barber and Don Babbage, actually, because I think you changed crew, didn't you? But Henry's Henry Barber.
Wonderful stuff.
Terrific job. And just by having some lights behind those curtains, give it a bit of extra everything that you want. That's a really good choice, because it can often be one of Doctor Who's weak points, is the running up and down corridors, and the production makes a virtue of it. And of course, under circumstances where you might not have been able to do the show because you didn't have anywhere to do it, did you?
Can I think it's the bane of the Doctor Who interviewer's life that you get these old stagers who roll out over familiar anecdotes. So at the risk of that, I'm going to just mention the day that we had the fire department was called, because we're out at Elstree, right? I'm sure your listeners know this, but there was we couldn't use the usual studios at Television Centre because they'd discovered, like as though it was a surprise, there was asbestos in those buildings, because they did have asbestos at the time, but there was an understandable worry about health of people working in that environment. So anyway, we couldn't work in our normal studios, and it looked for a while, as you just said, that we couldn't do the show at all. But in the end, it was shot in tents, yay, out at Elstree Studios, where they shot at EastEnders. I'm looking at you just in case I've got any of this terribly wrong.
No.
But they also shot Hello, Hello, which is a forgotten British sitcom. But what happened is there was a fire alarm while we were there, and the fire engines poured out, everybody evacuated, and we all stood in the car park while ultimately nothing bad happened. But the fire department arrived, and the firemen came in and checked everything out. And then the people from Hello, Hello, which is set in France in World War II, had come out, and there was all these girls in their can-can outfits. So they did an impromptu can-can dance for the benefit of the firemen, which, kicking up their skirts and showing their frilly knickers. And I just love that. It was just one of the highlights of the shoot for me.
And the beautiful incongruity of show business.
But I have mentioned that anecdote before. So if you're thinking, oh Christ, we can't have that one again, just edit it out.
No, I didn't. I don't think we can talk about Greatest Show without at least giving a nod to the fact that this show should not have happened at all if it hadn't been for your inventive designer David Lasky and some last minute moving about, and the show
And
must go on.
all power to David Lasky, but it has to be said, the ultimate accolade goes to John Nathan Turner for just not letting it go. He wouldn't take no for an answer. He insisted on moving forward, and he didn't have to. So all power to John, and all gratitude to John.
Yeah, because we could be talking about another Shada where we're having to
What a
fill in the
nightmare.
gaps.
Yeah. No, it was his persistence and tenacity which caused us to end up doing it. Thank you, John.
Which means we're not watching animated corridors, so or photo reconstructions. Well, Connor and I both, I think, went for something that should come as no surprise. It was a great success then, and I think has stood the test of time. And that's Ian Reddington's performance as the chief clown, who I just think is extraordinary.
Oh, he's wonderful. And I remember Stephen Wyatt at the time being absolutely enchanted and delighted because it was a kind of creepy commedia dell'arte kind of take on things. And again, it's timeless. A lot of 60s, 70s, 80s science fiction, and Doctor Who in particular, falls down because even though it's supposed to be futuristic or alien, it looks dated. But the thing about those clown costumes, and the costume design in this was magnificent. Who's it by? I keep wanting to say Rosie something, but that's wrong, isn't it?
Yes, is Rosalind Ebbott. That's right. Yeah.
Oh, it was Rosie. Good for me, because she was
well done.
brilliant. Yeah, Ros Ebbott. She was, yeah, and she worked whenever she did work with us. Because on Doctor Who, people won't believe this, but back in those days, it was like the Hollywood studios. I mean, I was reading about Hollywood, the golden age of Hollywood. And what happened at the Hollywood studios it was an assembly line. They're constantly putting out movies. And what that meant was if you were directing a movie, you'd get the next cameraman who was available, the next costume designer, the next set designer, and you might have a bit of wiggle room, but not really. So you're kind of just assigned to people. And that was the way it was at the BBC. You would just have people rotated in. And these people were all very good at what they did, but they weren't always the right people for Doctor Who, which needs a certain mindset. And you could get people who are completely wrong for Doctor Who. We talked briefly about the photography and how some of the lighting people would overlight the set because they were used to doing snooker or something where you just want lots of light on everything. So you'd get people who were technically proficient but unsympathetic. And Ros Ebbott was the complete opposite of that. She was brilliant and just right for us. So I'm so pleased to be talking about people of that caliber who were sympathetic, who were got the show and worked with the show and did such a fab job. So the costume design was fabulous. And those clown costumes, not only are they beautiful in themselves, they remain utterly timeless and they will never date, and they'll always be tremendously effective.
And now here I am coming back in to the past. I mean, it's the present as I record this, but the bit you've just listened to is in the future and hasn't happened yet. And now you're back to a point where that hadn't happened, even though it has now happened. Well, it hasn't now happened, but now when you're listening to it, it's happened because you've heard it. And in fact, because you've heard it, it actually happened then, but it hasn't happened now or yet. But when you listen to it, it will have happened then. But you're listening to me now. So I hope that's clear. But anyway, so whatever happened between myself and Andrew is a secret unknown to this current incarnation of Toby, but you'll have heard what I made of it in the future. And so it seems unnecessary for me to say anymore because I currently know less about what's just happened in this podcast than everybody else in the universe, because me from the past has done it, you've heard me from the past doing it, and I from the present haven't done that yet. So I hope, like the chief clown, you've let me entertain you, but I'm now going to run up and down some corridors looking for further entertainment, but I shall be avoiding those old moon designs. I wonder why. But thanks to Connor, and thanks in advance to Andrew Cartmel, and I hope you've enjoyed this edition of Happy Times and Places. And if you have, please, I don't need 3 nines from a weird suburban family thing, but 5 stars on Apple iTunes player will do as the equivalent if you've enjoyed what I have to offer, whether you enjoyed my weightlifting or my jokes. See, unlike Nord, I can do both. I hope they met with your approval and you won't be sending a bolt of lightning in my direction. Well, thank you very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Connor J. Adkins, who you can find on Twitter at Connor, 2 N's, J. Adkins, Adkins with a D, at Connor J. Adkins. Well worth a follow. Thanks to Connor, and thanks to Andrew Cartmel, script editor of The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. I'm grateful to him for joining us, and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Alex Rowan, Murray Robertson, Sean Reynolds, Paula Reynolds, Peter Reed, Ian Radford, Liam Price, Kitty Placati, Shane Plays, Steve Phillips, John Pettigrew, Ken Patterson, Richard Patey, Neil Pascoe, James Parsons, Andy Parkinson, Russell Parker, Mark Trevor Owen, Runar Brutig Olsen, Neil O, Jeremiah O'Connor, Steve O'Brien, Tom Neenan, Andrew Nixon, Paul Murphy, Chris Murphy, and Sheila Moore. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you'd like your name read out on the credits, that's one of the perks of being a patron. You can go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, and for as little as £3 a month, you get your name read out, you get advance releases, you get bonus materials, you get monthly AMAs, and all sorts of other goodies at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. You can also go to kofi.com/Toby Hadoke if you would like to do a one-off donation. It doesn't get you any monthly perks. And you can support these in a non-financial way if you'd prefer, and that's fine. I'm just grateful to you for listening, by going to any of your suppliers of podcasts and giving these 5 stars and a few nice lines of review. Thank you. Well, things have run away with me a bit in Hadoke Towers, so I'm not going to give you much of a coda because they take forever. But a coda, here I'll tell you what I'll give you for this one. A coda is how my other half pronounced Ocado until we got together. So this is like 10 years ago now, and I was like, no, I think you mean what do you call it? And it wasn't a thing of pronunciation, because I know that we had a delivery once. It's terribly middle class talking about the different ways of pronouncing Ocado. The Waitrose was then, wasn't it? Now Marks and Spencer's delivery service. But I'm sure we had one at Christmas where the man called it Ocado, or so. He certainly called it something that wasn't Ocado. It certainly wasn't the way I pronounce it. And I only pronounce it that way because my ex-wife, who was the person that introduced me to Ocado, she pronounced it like that, and it sounds a bit like avocado. So I go Ocado, but I can't remember. Did he say Ocado? Anyway, this driver pronounced it this way. I'm your Ocado driver or whatever, and I was like, "Is that how you pronounce it?" And he went, "Oh yeah, but I could be wrong." And I was like, "Oh right, okay." I said to her, "Listen to how this nice man and he knew her as well, because why am I giving you anecdotes about Christmas supermarket service? Because his dad was a driver on Corrie, and he said, 'Oh, you're the girl from Corrie, but my dad's Peter,' the blah blah blah." So anyway, so he pronounced it. So and so then I said to her, "Oh well, he pronounces it like this." And he went, "Yeah, but and I thought he was then going to go, yeah, that's how we all pronounce it." He said, "Oh no, I could be wrong." And it was almost like he'd sometimes how you say a word wrong and then you have to commit to it. I did it recently with Charles Norton when I was talking about Doctor Who actors, and there's an actor called Robert Sidaway who's in The Invasion and The Savages, and we were talking about the fact that he'd recently done an interview with Doctor Who magazine, and for some reason, for the first and only time in my life, I went, Robert Sidaway, and Charles went, oh, is it Sidaway? I'd always thought it was Sidaway, and I was immediately annoyed with myself because I didn't want to explain that, well, no, I've always called him Sidaway, but for some reason I said Sidaway today because I had no reason for so doing, and it took us down an alley of conversation I didn't want to go, much like it's doing now, because I started talking about Ocado, which Shirley called a coda. And so then I, as a joke, started calling it a kudu. And now she doesn't know how it's pronounced at all. I still don't really know how it's pronounced, but I definitely know it's closer to a cardo than it is to a coda, because those aren't the letters in the right order. She's a bit Mrs. Maniprop. And it's definitely not a kudu, because I made that up. But that I got led into all of that because I said a coda, as in a coda, the end piece of this podcast, which took me down very much of a middle-class pronunciation alley. So hold your noughts up now.